Okay, welcome once again to another video lecture for multimedia writing, and we are going to be talking about reporting here. We've somewhat been talking about that already, but we're going to talk in more specific terms about that today, reporting and how we put together a story. I think I have mentioned the inverted pyramid to you before. The first sentence is the most important sentence, and it's called the lead, and it contains the most important information, and it goes to the top of the story. So we don't write things in chronological order of this happened, then this happened, then this happened. We take the ultimate thing that we consider to be the most important thing, and we put that at the beginning of the story. The second sentence then adds detail to the lead. It's less essential information, but still important information and relates to the information that's in the lead. The body of the story, as we go down the inverted pyramid, adds more detail. It is important, but less essential than what appears in the lead. So you have to sort of make some judgments as to what's the most important thing in the story. The least important information then appears near the end. Now, originally, when this format, this system was established, the idea was that when you were publishing a story in a newspaper and space was limited, then you could cut the story from the bottom at any place, at the end of any sentence, and it would still make sense. And while we're not as concerned with that today, especially if we're talking about publishing a story online, still there's some value to that idea. This format helps readers save time, and our first consideration is the reader, the audience. The format helps readers save time and allow stories to be cut from the bottom to save space. But the reader then can read the beginning of the story and decide if he wants to continue or if she wants to continue reading the story. So we're going to look at a little video here about the inverted pyramid.
Okay, we're going to look today at the inverted pyramid type of story, which is the most common type of structure you will see in newspaper reporting and across the journalistic world. Efficiently as possible. So let's look now at an example of this type of writing. You don't have to look very far. Typically, dozens of stories every day in different newspapers are written in this style. In this case, we are looking at the Toronto Star, and it is a story about two men who are wanted in Scarborough in regards to a car robbery and stabbing. So let's take a look at the lead. Before we do that, you can tell just by looking at this story that it's an inverted pyramid story. Each sentence is its own paragraph. The sentences are relatively short. And the first sentence contains the key information. Police have asked for the public's assistance in finding two suspects wanted in a stabbing and robbery early Friday morning in Scarborough. Police say that around 3:30 a.m. near Lawrence Avenue Road East and Rouge Hills Drive, a man and a woman sitting in a parked vehicle were approached by two unknown men. And the story goes on from there to describe what happened in the robbery. And then after that, we get to the descriptions of the suspects. Two suspects. One is white, about 27, 5'8". Second one is white, about 6'2", 185 pounds to 200 pounds. And finally, the very last thing is the number to call if you have any information. So the reporter in this case, rightfully so, has decided that the least important thing in this story is the actual numbers for people to call if they know anything. But before that, you've got to get to the point and say why police are looking for these two people and what they allegedly did. All right, so and
then I'm going to move this ahead to another part of the video here.
The reader. So what we're looking,
and would make the point to you again. Notice he was talking about short sentences, short paragraphs. Make new paragraphs frequently. That's very important, and that's one of the first things I look at when you submit an assignment. Is, are there paragraphs, first of all? And then if there are paragraphs, are they too long? But many students just basically don't make paragraphs at all. So you want to make very short paragraphs. Typically, I would say certainly not more than 3 sentences in a paragraph, but more commonly 1 or 2 sentences. Okay, now he's going to give you some bad examples, basically, of how to write a story not using the inverted pyramid.
Looking at now is a fictional story, and this particular story is written without the organizational inverted pyramid format. The facts are just simply presented willy-nilly with no rhyme or reason, and what results is something that's confusing and which really backs into the story. So you'll see here in the Mueller News, the headline, "An accident occurs." Okay, that's true, but it really doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't tell the reader anything. And let's take a look at the collection of facts here. And this collection of facts is from an exercise designed by Ken Blake, who is a journalism professor at Middle Tennessee State University. An accident occurred. It happened yesterday. Today is Tuesday. The accident was a car accident. It happened in Hamilton, where Barton Street and Jones Road intersect. One person was killed. That person is John Frazier. He was 20 years old and lived in East Hamilton. He was driving east. I've obviously changed some of the locations here to more reflect where we live, not Tennessee. He was driving east on Barton Street at about 5 p.m. He lost control of the car. It was raining. The road was slick. He was also driving about 20 kilometers over the speed limit. He was the only one in the car. The impact crushed the whole front of the car. Frazier was thrown through the car's windshield. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He was killed instantly. So you can see here, very, very frustrating to read. The most important fact in the story, the fact that this 20-year-old man was killed, is not even mentioned until the end of the story. So this is what can happen when you do not organize the story according to news values.
Okay, so you see that, as he says, the very last thing that is mentioned is that the young person was killed. And then we don't find that it is mentioned one person was killed here in the 4th or 5th sentence for the first time. And then they identify that person. But this information here, and I can't highlight it.
Collection of facts.
This information here, one person was killed. The person was John Frazier, 20 years old, lived in East Hamilton. That information should be in the lead. That information should be at the beginning of the story and not in the middle of the story. Also, you see here, no paragraphs, no indentations. The story is not broken up into short sentences and in particular short paragraphs. All right, let's continue on with more information here about media writing and basic media writing in a reporting kind of context. The lead contains the most essential information in the story and should attract the reader's interest as well. Ideally, we get the reader interested in the story because we give the reader the most important facts of the story first, and then the reader will continue to consume the story. Okay, here's another video, and again, I thank the folks that produce these videos that we use. And we're going to pick it up in the middle here with some examples of some bad leads.
I'm asking you to make a donation right now before the official FEC deadline. And if
is that you can begin a story. That you shouldn't do, but that I often see young journalists use in their stories. So here are some don'ts. Don't ever begin your story with a quotation. Okay, seldom is a quote so interesting that it's the best way to begin a story. Moreover, because it's difficult to understand the context of the quote because you're leading with it, you got no context, it's rarely the best way to summarize a story. I see a lot of articles in school newspapers begin with quotations. Don't do it. It's lazy. Editors hate it. Readers get confused by it. Next, you want to avoid leads that begin with questions. all right, it's just stalling, all right, because the point of your article is to provide information. So don't begin by asking a question. Begin by providing information, by answering the question. Similarly, you want to avoid beginning your article with statements like picture this or imagine this. Chances are they can't, okay? The reader wasn't there, but you were. It's your job to report on what you saw. You want to use your words to sort of paint a portrait so that the reader can imagine it or picture it, but you don't want to come out and say picture this or imagine this, okay? That's kind of implied. That's why they're reading your article, so they can get an idea of what transpired, of what happened, of what it looked like. Now, this next one we've already talked about, but I really can't emphasize it enough, so I'm going to bring it up one more time. That's topical leads. You really want to avoid these at all costs. For example, you might see a lead something like students posting on the website juicycampus.com is a controversial issue. Or you might see something else that, the lead says this is a controversial issue. Well, that's not a good lead, all right? Instead, what you want to do is explain in your lead why it's controversial. An alternative approach might be to have like a list lead. You could list some of the different nasty or controversial things said on Juicy Campus and then have your nut graph. Or you could try an opposite lead where you have one student saying juicycampus.com is disgusting and should be banned, and another student saying, juicycampus.com should not be banned, that's censorship, and students should be allowed to say whatever they want. Similarly, if you have a lead like Harvard professor Cornel West spoke about race relations at Stansbury University last week, that's a topical lead. Okay, the fact that he spoke at the university, that is not really in and of itself news. What he said, however, could be newsworthy, might be newsworthy. Did he say something that he's never said before? Does he have some sort of new, philosophy on race relations? Or did he say something that was maybe controversial or that the audience sort of had mixed reactions to? Something like that would be newsworthy, and that is what you would want to begin your story with, not a topical lead like this professor spoke at this university last week. Professors speak at universities all the time. All right.
So I'm going to pause it there. So those last two in particular, and the last one, the very last one, if you're writing about a speech, and I may have you do an exercise in which you write about a speech. Don't say that someone spoke at the university. We know that in advance. What did he say? Pick something that he said that we did not know he was going to say and make that your lead. Choose something. Find something that you think is most interesting, most meaningful. And so, yes, he spoke about race relations, but what about race relations? What specifically did he say about race relations? The previous one is juicycampus.com is controversial. Why is it controversial? What about it is controversial? That's just too vague. And some people might not even agree that it's controversial. But what is it specifically that we might say is controversial? That lead is just too vague. Okay. Writers must make news judgments based on the interest and needs of the audience. Again, always keep the audience in mind. Who is the audience? What would they be interested in? What do they need to know? And so we base those news judgments on these things. And I don't want to spend too much time on each one of these, but impact. How much does it affect the average person? Timeliness, something that happened recently. If it happened, now it's conceivable something happened 6 months ago or even 6 years ago. Might be newsworthy if we're just now finding out about it, but that makes it timely if we're just now finding something about it. Proximity, it's close to home. Prominence, it's someone who is well known. Uniqueness, it's different. We haven't heard a story like this before. Those are the things that go into news judgment. Again, the lead paragraph, one way to approach that, and really in writing a story in general, is to answer these questions: who, what, when, and where. Also why and how, if we know why and how. But so the entire story to some extent is spent in answering who, what, when, where, but the lead in particular should answer those questions. So let's look at this video on that subject.
Welcome to Crafting the Journalistic Lead with Peter BG. This video will tell you the nuts and bolts of a journalistic lead. Now, the lead is the most important sentence in your article.
Let me run this up a little bit, get to something that I think is more useful. Again, who, what, when, where, why, and how if we know. So let's look and see a kind of a silly example, but nevertheless an example that explains that idea.
Let's take a look at an example. Here in this example, I've highlighted in various colors the 6 different elements of a lead. In this example, we begin with the why, but any lead could really begin with any of the 6 topics. So let's take a look. In order to be sure his deliveries will arrive in time for Christmas, Santa Claus is looking to hire 300 temporary elves the week before Christmas to help with worldwide present distribution at his North Pole facility.
So, who? Santa Claus. What? Is looking to hire 300 temporary elves. When? The week before Christmas. Where? At his North Pole facility. Why? In order to be sure his deliveries will arrive in time for Christmas. And how? To help with worldwide present distribution, I guess. Sometimes how or why are a little bit difficult to explain or to discuss. But who, what, when, where are the basic things. Now, I would say here, it's unusual to start a story with why. Very often we don't know why, and very often we don't know how. I will tell you, and I don't know that you will read this or hear this elsewhere. I'm not sure that I've ever seen it presented this way. But who and what are almost always the most important thing. Of who, what, when, where. Who? Santa Claus. What? Is looking to hire 300 temporary elves. When and where are almost always less important than who and what. When? Well, the week before Christmas. Where? The North Pole facility. But Santa Claus is looking to hire 300 temporary elves. That's the gist of the story. Who and what are the most important things. And therefore, most of the time, if you will put who or what at the beginning of the story and then let when and where sort of take care of themselves, you'll be okay. And then more often than not, why and how are going to come in somewhere after the lead, if we even know why and how. But who, what, when, and where, and of those, who and what are the most important. Basic summary lead: 2 people were killed and 4 were injured when a truck collided with a passenger car on Interstate 59 near the Cottondale exit. So that, if we knew nothing other than just that information, we'd know quite a bit about what happened. And then the story, as we go through the inverted pyramid, will fill in more details. It's not always necessary to answer all 4 W's in the lead. As I said a moment ago, who and what are usually most important. And those, more often than not, who or what will be at the very beginning of the lead, the first thing that you write. Using quotations, there are indirect quotations. I believe we've talked about paraphrasing. This is efficient, it is direct, it saves space, so it's important to be able to paraphrase. Direct quotations, these are the exact words that an individual speaks. They add variety to the story, they add color, they bring some emotion, and very often some opinion into the story, and you as the reporter are not supposed to express an opinion, but someone who's involved in the story can express an opinion. You ought to try to find another quotation that expresses perhaps an opposite opinion for the sake of balance, for the sake of being objective. Here's a USA Today story. I don't want to go through this line by line with you. You can study this story for how it's put together. I will scroll through it a bit, look at the paragraphs. You see all the short, frequent paragraphs here. I can, without reading the story at all, I can look and see that the way this is organized is probably pretty good as far as inverted pyramid form is concerned, because I see a lot of paragraphs and they're all quite short. So the lead here says Caitlin Sechrist, who, a 21-year-old college student blocked from life-saving surgery because she can't get copies of her medical records, will receive the file, what, after Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, another who, and a judge intervened Wednesday. When? Also the fact that Arizona is mentioned here, and also Phoenix is what's called the date line. So that kind of takes care of where. So we have who, what, when, and where in this lead. Now, the next sentence is, it's not that it's not important, but it's less essential. The most essential information is put into the lead. So the next sentence comes in and provides us with some additional valuable information that starts to flesh out the story. It explains more about it. Sechrist can't eat, can't work, delayed her college graduation, and is in constant pain because of acute pancreatitis. She wears a feeding tube around the clock and depends on handfuls of medications. More than a dozen hospitalizations later, the next pancreatic attack could kill her. All of those are short sentences. You notice that we refer to her first by her full name, Caitlin Sechrist, but then after that we just refer to her as Sechrist. It doesn't say Ms. Sechrist. It doesn't say Miss Sechrist. One of the AP style guidelines that we've been looking at tell you not to use courtesy titles. So not Mr., not Mrs., not Ms. We scroll down through here and we don't see a lot of direct quotes. Here's the first direct quote. So we have seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs before we see a direct quote. But it is important to include some direct quotes. We've spoken with the patient's family and other outside organizations that could help with this to find any avenue possible to get these records to her, said Patrick Patak, a spokesman for the governor. And this part here, again, we've talked about this attribution. Who said so? Who said that? It's important to indicate who provided that information, who spoke those words. So that's called attribution, and that is very important. I would spend maybe another time on how this direct quote is constructed, but the attribution typically comes at the end of the quote. Notice that a comma goes at the end of the quote, and that is inside the quotation mark there. So that's important. Less important, but still something that you should know. So we go through the story, and we're going down the inverted pyramid. The writer and the editor have decided that as it comes to the end of the story, that while this is interesting and it's important, it's the least important. An aspiring nurse, Sechrist hopes to schedule her surgery soon so she can get back to school and a more normal life. That story also sort of serves to wrap the story up in a satisfying way, but the editors determined that that's the least essential thing in that story. Linking, we do a lot of this now today, and every story that you write, even if it was for a newspaper, would almost certainly be on a web page. And so we write in terms of thinking that the story is probably going to go online first, whether it's for a newspaper organization, television station, radio station, whatever. And then it may end up in a traditional newspaper or on a TV news broadcast or radio newscast later, but it's almost certainly going to go online first. And so online, we do a lot of links. I do a thing with KETR called the Blacklands Cafe every day or 5 days a week. Linking, of course, connects the online story with other relevant stories by hypertext, and this provides added value for the reader. It enhances the reader's experience. So here's the page for the Blacklands Cafe. And every day there's a new story there, and this was one that was there recently. Does hedonism lead to happiness? And I'm trying to remember what we had here. I probably need to add another link or so. This is a young woman who is with Campus Recreation at A&M Commerce who is the guest on this program, so I'll link to Campus Recreation. And it tells you all about Campus Recreation there. And then there's a link to hedonism. Oh, yes, and this was the original story. Hedonism leads to happiness. And by the way, I don't subscribe to that particular philosophy, but the headline vastly overstates that idea. It's really more a statement that hedonism needs to be, is something that balances self-control, but that you need both. So, but this is the original story that she wanted to talk about, and it comes from the University of Zurich. And someone now, if they want to know more about this, they can read more about that story. So that's linking by hypertext. If you can link to your own stories, that's the best thing. In other words, if you are writing for the Dallas Morning News, if you can write for, if you can link to other stories within the Dallas Morning News, that's the best thing. This is another program that we did with a fellow named Derek Price out of Greenville. He writes a column called Car Gazing. And so I linked to his online column, and this also appears in regular newspapers, but obviously it appears online as well. And we talked about a story that came from USA Today and on the cars that are best for dogs. If you have a dog, these are the cars that are best for traveling with dogs. And we had a conversation on the air about that, and this is the podcast for that program. But if someone is interested in this subject, then they can go and they can read the article for themselves. So that's an example of linking, and we do a lot of that in media writing today because almost all media writing ultimately will end up online. So we'll end it with that, and I'm sure you'll have an exercise that will be related to this, and so you can look forward to that. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.